The question that stopped the room. The station bar known as the Wandering Comet floated at the edge of civilized space, orbiting a lonely gas giant that nobody bothered naming anymore. It was the kind of place where traders, mercenaries, the explorers, and drifters gathered to exchange stories that grew taller with every round of drinks. On this particular cycle, the bar was crowded. A dozen species occupied tables scattered beneath glowing lanterns. A four-armed Vexian argued about cargo tariffs. A pair of crystalline Tallarans debated philosophy. Three towering court warriors competed in a drinking contest they were destined to regret. And sitting quietly in the corner was a human. Nobody knew much about him. He wore a plain grey jacket. No military insignia. No company logo. No visible weapons. Just an older man nursing a drink while staring through the viewport at the stars. Humans were not uncommon anymore. But they remained fascinating. They were relatively new to the galactic community and carried a reputation that ranged from creative problem solvers to completely insane. Tonight, curiosity got the better of someone. A young Vexian named Tarek climbed onto a stool and pointed toward the human. "Hey." Several heads turned. The human looked up. "Yeah." Tarek grinned. "I've got a question." The human shrugged. "Ask." The Vexian's friends laughed as he raised his glass. "Human, what's your kill count?" The room erupted in chuckles. Among many species, asking about combat records was common entertainment. Most military veterans exaggerated. Mercenaries lied outrageously. Everyone expected a ridiculous answer. Maybe 50. Maybe 100. The human stared at his drink. The smile faded from his face. For several seconds, he didn't answer. The room slowly grew quiet. Then he said, very softly, "I don't know." A few people laughed. The human didn't. Tarek tilted his head. "You don't know." "No." "How can you not know?" The human swallowed the liquid in his glass. "Because after a certain point, the keeping track becomes difficult." The laughter stopped. Everyone in the bar turned toward him. Tarek forced another grin. "What, like 1,000?" The human remained silent. The grin disappeared. The room suddenly felt smaller. One of the court warriors leaned forward. 2,000. The human took a slow sip. Still nothing. The court's eyes widened. Nobody laughed now. Tarek swallowed. "You serious?" The human finally looked around the room. His eyes seemed older than anyone had noticed before. Much older. "I spent 40 years in the Terran Defense Fleet." Silence. "Most of that during the expansion wars." Several patrons exchanged nervous glances. The expansion wars were ancient history now. But everyone knew them. Entire star systems had burned. Empires had vanished. The human continued. "I was present at the siege of Vega Prime." A crystalline Talaran nearly dropped its drink. "Impossible." The human shrugged. "I was there." The station seemed to freeze. The siege of Vega Prime was legendary. Every schoolchild in civilized space learned about it. Over 3 billion combatants had participated. Entire fleets were annihilated. The casualty numbers remained incomprehensible. Tarek's voice had become small. "You fought in that?" "Yes." "And your kill count?" The human looked back toward the stars. His reflection stared at him from the viewport. "When your ship destroys another ship, who gets the count?" Nobody answered. "The captain." Still silence. "The weapons officer." The room listened carefully. "The engineer who kept the reactor running." The human sighed. "What about the logistics crew who supplied ammunition? The technicians who repaired targeting systems?" Nobody had considered that. The human continued. My destroyer participated in fleet actions that killed millions. The room grew colder. Did I personally kill them? He shrugged. Maybe. A long pause followed. Then he added. Maybe not. Nobody knew what to say. The human took another drink. I stopped counting individuals after my first war. Tarek whispered. How many was that? The human's gaze hardened. For individuals? Around 300. Several patrons nearly choked. 300 was an astonishing number for most species. The human looked down at his glass. That was before Vega. The silence became absolute. Even the bartenders had stopped working. For the first time, everyone realized they were not sitting beside an ordinary traveler. They were sitting beside a survivor. Someone who had walked through one of the bloodiest eras in galactic history and somehow lived long enough to grow old. The Koth warrior finally spoke. What happened at Vega? The human smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. It was the smile of someone remembering ghosts. You really want to know? Nobody answered. Because suddenly they weren't sure they did. The human set down his glass. Outside the viewport, distant stars burned like scattered embers. Inside the bar, every living being waited. Then the old human began to tell his story. And the room learned that sometimes the most terrifying answer to a joke is the truth. The fire of Vega Prime. My name is Marcus Hale, the human began. At least that's the name I used when the war ended. The listeners exchanged confused glances. Marcus chuckled softly. You'd be surprised how many identities a soldier accumulates during 40 years of fighting. Nobody interrupted. Outside, ships drifted silently through the darkness. Inside, the old veteran's voice carried everyone into another age. I was 19 when I enlisted. Several species gasped. 19 was practically childhood for many civilizations. Marcus noticed. Humans grow up fast. One of the Koth muttered clearly. Marcus nodded. Back then, humanity was expanding rapidly. We discovered new worlds every year. New colonies. New trade routes. His expression darkened. And new enemies. The room remained silent. The coalition didn't believe humans belonged among the stars. They considered us primitive. Dangerous. A bitter smile crossed his face. They weren't entirely wrong. A few nervous chuckles appeared. Marcus continued. The first war started over a mining colony. Always does, one merchant muttered. Marcus pointed at him. Exactly. The merchant looked surprised. Nobody remembers the colony anymore. Nobody remembers the politicians. He leaned back. But everyone remembers the dead. The room listened. The first battle was chaos. Missiles. Railguns. Boarding actions. Marcus rubbed an old scar near his jaw. I remember seeing my first casualty. His eyes grew distant. He was my roommate. No one spoke. We had arrived together. Trained together. Marcus stared at nothing. A plasma round punched through 3 decks. His voice softened. There wasn't enough left of him to bury. The bar remained silent. Even the usually boisterous Koth warriors looked uncomfortable. Marcus continued. The first death is different. How? Tarek asked. Marcus looked at him. Because afterward, you realize the universe doesn't care. The words landed heavily. You expect something dramatic. Some grand realization. He shook his head. Instead, everything keeps moving. The stars still shine. The engines still run. People still eat dinner. And someone who was alive 5 seconds ago is simply gone. Nobody had a response. Marcus took a drink. The second death is easier. The room shifted uneasily. The third easier still. His voice remained calm. That's the dangerous part. Tarek swallowed. What is? Marcus met his eyes. Getting used to it. The young Vexian looked away. Marcus sighed. Years passed. Battles came and went. His expression became harder. Then Vega happened. Every listener leaned forward. The legendary battle. The turning point of the expansion was. Marcus looked toward the viewport. The coalition assembled the largest fleet in recorded history. His voice remained steady. 22,000 warships. Several patrons gasped. Humanity responded with 19,000. The numbers alone felt impossible. Marcus nodded. 2 armades. Millions of personnel. His eyes narrowed. Everyone knew one side wouldn't live alive. The room felt frozen. We fought for 73 days. A Talaran whispered. 73. Marcus nodded. No reinforcements. No retreat. He stared at his hands. We slept beside corpses because there was nowhere else. The silence deepened. Some days we fought 20 hours straight. Marcus smiled humorlessly. By the third week nobody remembered what normal life felt like. One of the court asked quietly. Were you afraid? Marcus answered immediately. Constantly. The court blinked. You admit that? Marcus laughed. Only fools aren't afraid in war. The warrior slowly nodded. Marcus continued. The final day arrived. His voice became quieter. Our fleet was losing. The room held its breath. We had fewer ships. Less ammunition. More casualties. He paused. Then command issued Order 17. The words sounded important. Marcus noticed their confusion. No one outside humanity knows Order 17. He took a long breath. It meant victory at any cost. Nobody liked the sound of that. Marcus looked around the room. Human fleets carried antimatter reserves for emergencies. The realization spread slowly. Then all at once. Eyes widened. Faces paled. Marcus nodded. You understand now. The court warrior whispered. You detonated the reserves. Marcus looked away. Thousands of them. The room fell silent. No one could imagine the destruction. Marcus's voice grew distant. The explosion consumed both fleets. The bar seemed unable to breathe. For 12 minutes, space itself burned. And for the first time since beginning his story, Marcus looked genuinely haunted. That's when I stopped counting. Ghosts among the stars. Years after Vega, the war finally ended. But peace, Marcus explained, was not the same as healing. He survived. Many did not. His ship escaped destruction by chance, drifting crippled through debris fields while rescue fleets searched for survivors. Out of 23,000 personnel assigned to his battle group, fewer than 300 lived. The room listened in stunned silence. People think survival is always a gift, Marcus said. Sometimes it feels more complicated. No one argued. After Vega, Marcus became a hero. Medals. Parades. Speeches. The galaxy celebrated. Marcus hated every minute of it. Because every celebration reminded me who wasn't there. He looked down. My friends should have been standing beside me. The old pain lingered behind every word. For years, he remained in service. New conflicts emerged. Pirates. Insurgencies. Border disputes. Nothing as catastrophic as Vega, but enough to keep soldiers busy. Enough to keep people dying. Marcus became an officer. Then a commander. Then a captain. Young recruits admired him. They saw a legend. He saw a warning. I spent years trying to teach them something. What? Asked Tarek. Marcus answered immediately. That war isn't glorious. The room nodded. Yet Marcus shook his head. No. Most people say that. Then they tell stories that make war sound exciting. Nobody interrupted. Marcus continued. The truth is uglier. His gaze hardened. Where is paperwork? Several listeners blinked. Paperwork? One merchant asked. Marcus laughed. Mountains of it. The room stared. He nodded. Supply requests. Casualty reports. Resource allocations. The listeners exchanged confused looks. Marcus smiled faintly. That's what nobody tells you. He pointed toward the stars. Empires aren't won by heroes. He pointed toward the floor. They are won by logistics. Even the court warriors seemed surprised. Marcus continued. The galaxy remembers battles. His expression grew serious. Soldiers remember names. A long silence followed. I still remember all of them. The room understood. Not every casualty. Not every number. But the people who mattered. Friends. Crewmates. Brothers and sisters forged in fire. Marcus looked older than ever. They never leave you. No one spoke. Outside, a freighter passed the station. Its lights drifted silently through darkness. Marcus watched it. Sometimes I still wake up expecting battle alarms. The confession surprised everyone. After all these years? Marcus nodded. Especially after all these years. The bar remained silent. The young Vexian finally asked. Then why travel alone? Marcus smiled. Because eventually every veteran learns something. What? The living need attention too. The room absorbed those words. Marcus leaned back. I spent decades speaking only with ghosts. His eyes softened. Eventually I realized they wouldn't want that. The atmosphere changed. For the first time, a hope entered the story. Marcus took a slow breath. So I retired. The merchant laughed nervously. And became a storyteller. Marcus grinned. Something like that. The room relaxed slightly. Then the bartender spoke. Do you regret it? Marcus considered. A very long time passed. Finally he answered. Every death. The room understood. But not the people I protected. Silence. Marcus nodded. Both things can be true. The wisdom of age settled over the listeners. War had shaped him. Scarred him. Changed him forever. Yet somehow it had not destroyed his humanity. That realization impressed the room more than any kill count ever could. But one final revelation remained. And Marcus had not yet reached it. The number nobody wanted. The drinks had long gone untouched. Every being in the bar listened. Marcus sat quietly for several moments. Then Tarek asked the question everyone still carried. So what is your kill count? A few listeners winced. But Marcus didn't seem offended. Instead, he smiled sadly. You're still thinking about numbers. Tarek looked embarrassed. Maybe. Marcus nodded. That's normal. He folded his hands. When I was young, numbers mattered to me too. The room waited. I thought they measured skill. His smile vanished. Then I learned what they really measure. Nobody spoke. Marcus looked around the room. Loss. Silence. A kill count is a record of lives that ended. The words landed heavily. No matter how justified. No matter how necessary. The room remained still. Marcus continued. When I was 21, I kept detailed records. His voice softened. Every battle. Every confirmed kill. Tarek listened carefully. Why? Marcus sighed. Pride. No one expected that answer. Marcus nodded. I wanted to impress people. The irony made several listeners uncomfortable. Then Marcus smiled bitterly. That stopped after a boarding action near Arcturus. The room waited. My squad captured an enemy vessel. His gaze drifted far away. I found photographs. Several listeners frowned. Photographs. Marcus nodded. The room understood instantly. Parents. Children. Partners. People waiting at home. People who loved those aboard. Marcus swallowed. That's when it became real. Silence. I realized every person I killed was the center of someone else's universe. Nobody moved. The old veteran continued quietly. After that, the counting felt wrong. The room sat motionless. Marcus looked toward the stars. I still fought. His voice remained steady. Sometimes you must. Nobody disagreed. But I stopped celebrating it. The bartender spoke softly. So you truly don't know? Marcus smiled. No. The room believed him. Not because the number was impossible, but because he had stopped caring about it long ago. The court warrior leaned forward. Can you estimate? Marcus laughed. A tired laugh. If you include direct combat. The room waited. Thousands. Several listeners flinched. If you include ship actions. His expression darkened. Millions. The room fell silent. Not from fear. From perspective. The number was too large to comprehend. Marcus noticed. That's exactly the problem. Nobody understood. He explained. Large numbers stop feeling human. The listeners slowly nodded. One death feels tragic. His voice remained calm. A million becomes a statistic. The room understood immediately. Marcus leaned forward. And that's dangerous. His eyes moved from person to person. Because every statistic is still made of individuals. The silence deepened. For a moment, nobody saw a soldier. Nobody saw a veteran. They saw a teacher. Someone who had learned terrible lessons and hoped others never would. Marcus smiled gently. That's why I prefer names. The room remained quiet. Because suddenly the joke from earlier seemed childish. The question itself had been wrong. Not malicious. Just incomplete. A kill count revealed nothing important. Character did. Choices did. What someone carried afterward did. Marcus had answered the joke honestly. And somehow that answer meant far more than any number ever could. Yet one final lesson remained. The most important lesson of all. Humanity's real strength. The station had entered its artificial night cycle. Many patrons should have left hours ago. None did. Marcus's story had become larger than war. Larger than history. Larger than numbers. The bartender finally asked. What kept humanity alive? Marcus blinked. Alive. During the expansion wars. The room leaned closer. The old veteran smiled. That's easy. Everyone waited. It wasn't our weapons. Several listeners looked surprised. It wasn't our fleets. More confusion followed. It wasn't our soldiers. Now the room was completely lost. Marcus pointed toward the crowded bar. It was this. Nobody understood. The bartender glanced around. The bar. Marcus laughed. People. The room became quiet. Humanity survived because every loss made us value life more. His voice remained calm. We mourned. He pointed toward himself. We remembered. Then he pointed around the room. And eventually we learned to cooperate. The listeners nodded slowly. Marcus continued. The greatest victory after Vega wasn't military. What was it? Tarek asked. Marcus smiled. Peace. The answer surprised nobody. And yet it felt powerful. Marcus stood. The movement startled several patrons. For hours he had seemed rooted to his chair. Now he looked ready to leave. Tarek quickly asked one final question. Do you ever wish things had been different? Marcus paused. The room waited. Finally he nodded. Every day. Silence. Then he smiled. But wishing doesn't change history. The stars glowed beyond the viewport. What matters is what we learn from it. Nobody spoke. The old veteran picked up his coat. As he turned toward the exit, Tarek called after him. Marcus. The human looked back. The young Vexian hesitated. Then he asked, what should I tell people when they ask your kill count? The room held its breath. Marcus thought for a moment. Then he smiled. A genuine smile this time. Not haunted. Not bitter. Just human. Tell them I stopped counting. Tarek nodded. Marcus walked toward the door. Then he stopped once more. Oh. Everyone looked up. The old veteran glanced around the room. If someone ever brags about how many they've killed. The silence deepened. Marcus's voice became gentle. Ask them how many they saved. No one moved. No one spoke. Because suddenly that seemed like the only number worth knowing. A moment later, the door slid open. Marcus Hell disappeared into the station corridor. The room remained silent long after he left. Eventually conversations resumed. But something had changed. The joke was forgotten. The number was forgotten. What remained was the lesson. The old human had fought in battles beyond imagination. He had survived horrors that most species could scarcely comprehend. Yet after all those years, all those wars, all those deaths, the thing he chose to carry forward was not pride. Not victory. Not revenge. It was compassion. And perhaps that was the real reason humanity had endured. Not because humans were the strongest warriors. Not because they possessed the deadliest fleets. But because even after witnessing the worst the galaxy could offer, they still believed life was worth protecting. Outside the station, countless stars filled the darkness. Each one a world. Each world filled with lives. And somewhere among them, an old soldier continued his journey, carrying memories too heavy to count and wisdom too valuable to keep to himself. As for his kill count, the galaxy would never know. But after hearing his story, nobody cared anymore.